Good morning, folks. Sorry, in case you're now hearing me do an intro twice, I wasn't entirely sure if things were working there. So, thank you all for joining us for today's session, which is the principles of event site design with Rupert from Events Site Design in the UK. As you may have heard me say already, I'm quite familiar with Rupert and what the guys in event site design do. They do an awful lot of good CAD work for us in Safe Events. So we're based in Dublin in Ireland, and the guys are based in the UK, but they do the majority of our CAD work these days. Looking forward to this one, I think the numbers for this are quite high, which I think is really fascinating, considering we've always thought that CAD was kind of a really niche thing and that not everyone would be into it. But I think speaking with Rupert, there's a few things going on. I think some people are thinking, look, in the world we're in at the minute, and I'm not working too much, picking up a new skill could be good. I think some people are genuinely spending some time trying to kind of polish skills they might have already had. I think a lot of us at some stage did a bit of CAD or have been introduced to CAD, but I always describe it as being quite similar to Excel, in that if you're using it all the time, you can become quite proficient, but if you kind of stop using it for a while, you're going to forget how to do a lot of things in it. So I think it's a little bit like that. And I think some of the people here, I know, agree with me on that one, who have been telling me that they did CAD years ago and probably wouldn't remember how to do anything in it now. So usual story, but I shouldn't say that because I know some people are new and haven't been on these webinars before. Please use the chat function, ask your questions in there. We will jump in and out between slides and stuff with Rupert if we need to. We will definitely do Q&A at the end. And as we have been doing in the last few webinars, for the end, we will put the raise your hand to chat function thing live, which lets you guys turn on your mic, turn on your camera, and maybe ask a question. So what I always say is we like the interactivity and we like having more faces on these webinars. So chances are, if you have a question and you're willing to turn your mic on or turn your camera on and join us to ask it, you'll probably get it asked and answered. Whereas if there's loads of questions in the chat, obviously we're not going to get to all of them. I'm going to put a poll live really quickly. Rupert was keen to get a bit of a handle on who's in the room, as it were. So if you can pick an answer for us on that poll and just let us know. Rupert has kind of designed the presentation in such a way that, for instance, if everyone was here from festivals, he can kind of go one way with it. If everyone was here from exhibitions and corporate, he can go another way. Rupert and I were actually joking that I put in other because I figured we could do the longest list in the world, or we could just put in other as a fifth option. And I have a funny feeling other is going to be the biggest category, which is what it looks like. As usual, I should say thank you to Actavo Events and Paul Griffin and the team in there for supporting us with these webinars. They continue to support us with them, and we're looking at a few other things and maybe expanding the series a bit and stuff. So stay tuned. I'm not sure what we'll do, but there's a few things being discussed at the minute. So we won't be abandoning you guys. I don't think at the end of July, we should have a few things to offer. So there we go. We're looking at about 41% other and 35% festivals, and then the rest are a good bit smaller. All right. Okay. That's probably what we thought was going to happen. So let me just reset that one. And I have one more that Rupert was keen to get a handle on. So let me just put this poll live. And again, give us a quick answer to this. And it'll help us out with the session. So like I said, Rupert's going to take over. He's going to go through the slides. If burning questions come up in the chat, or if Rupert's discussing something on a particular slide or during the session that I think we need to jump in and kind of discuss there and then, I'll do that. Otherwise, you may not see me to the very end, and we'll do the Q&A then. So like I said, keep the questions coming in the Q&A as they come to you in the chat function, because if it makes sense to kind of jump in and interrupt Rupert with it to ask it at a critical time, we can do that. So I'd say ask the questions as they come to you in the chat. And we'll get to them if we can. So I'd say, Rupert, if you're there ready to do your thing, I'd say you can start. Let me see, 50% oversight and responsibility, and then 22 say they've minimal involvement. So you're looking at a lot of people here are kind of maybe responsible for the overall event, but probably have a direct report or something that does the actual CAD work, maybe.
Great. Great.
Right, off you go, sir. I'm going to turn my camera.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? I'm guessing you can, even though he's disappeared. Okay, so hi everyone. I'm going to start the presentation. I probably should have done that straight away. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, so so this is a presentation I've been asked to do on event design principles, and with me, and I have a company called Event Site Design. So a quick caveat is I haven't gone all the way, I haven't tested and trialed all the way through this presentation yet. So apologies if I stumble a bit and get a bit stuck. I'm going to make some of it up as I go along. So I'll run through a little bit about me, a bit about the business, and then we're going to talk about the core principles. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology that we use. Obviously, AutoCAD is one of them, but we also use some other technology as well. And then we're going to apply some of our principles to some scenarios. Right then. So firstly, a little bit about me. Well, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you may have saw I did a post about my new LinkedIn banner, which is this. Now, Mark, when he saw it, he couldn't understand it. He thought it was a bit out there, but there is a reason for this. So I was pretty much born into the industry. And in fact, I was brought up in the circus, hence the circus themed here. It's not just that I'm a Hugh Jackman fan, although I am as well. So that is very much my background. I guess it's in my blood. And we're obviously in the circus when I was very young. We stopped when I was about 7 or 8 years old. But we would travel all the way around the UK and we'd go to lots of different events and festivals. And of course, I absolutely loved them and never knew at that time that I could actually make a living doing it unless I was running a circus. So my parents ran this circus. It was a non-animal circus, by the way. We didn't actually have elephants. But we thought it looked quite good for the elephant that's on my head there. We'd go all the way around, and it wasn't until I was 18 years old that I realised that I could make a living out of doing events. And so I got a lot of great mentorships from some brilliant people in the industry. I started doing some qualifications, and then managed to, after various bits of experience doing various roles, I got a job at WOMAD Festival. This is WOMAD. This is in fact one of the photos that we took with our drone that we have as part of the business now. So that was 13 years ago. I started with WOMAD sort of from the bottom, and I'm still there today now as their operations manager. And it's been really pivotal for me to get to where I am. And part of my role there is I got to learn how to use AutoCAD. And I kind of fell in love with it. It was really, I got quite geeky about it. So I got really into the advanced features of it. And I guess that's how I came about to start Event Site Design. So it's as any freelancer or any business owner, I wanted to go out there and use my knowledge and do other events, and I wanted to do production and operations, which is what I still do now. I found that it was very saturated in the industry of lots of production managers and operations managers. And I found it really hard to define myself. So I wanted to build a business which was more niche, and hence Event Site Design. So we're particular. We have a few particular core services, which is the site design, so CAD services, the consultancy of that, the planning. And then we also do obviously the operational management, but we also do markout with GPS technology. And so that's a little bit about Event Site Design. So we provide everything from just your simple CAD design right through to full consultancy. With my background, I've also been throughout my freelance career a safety officer, And so with the various qualifications that I've taken, I implement those to the site plans that we design. And that's really how I've developed the event design principles. This is just a quick slide I nicked from another one I've got just to show you the sort of events that we do. Obviously, WOMAD we've talked about. I site manage Blenheim Horse trials. We look after the site design for a pub and a park, and we look after some events for Red Bull. There's some others on here. We do Runfest Run, and we do design for Truckfest and Tramlines and lots of other clients as well. So they're mainly, by the way, we mainly do outdoor events, not all, but mostly outdoor events and mostly large scale music festivals. But as I say, not all of them are. You saw Red Bull Soapbox. We also do another one for Red Bull, which is a run. So, and we do some indoor stuff as well. So it's a wide range, but I guess because my background is festivals, and obviously with WOMAD and Glastonbury and things like that I've been involved in, that I suppose I gravitate towards more festivals. So what do I mean by event design principles? And it's really the parameters in which we work within when we're conceptualizing and designing our site plans. It's all the things that we need to think about when we are placing our pieces of infrastructure and our and all the different elements, and even when we're selecting a venue. It's all the things that we have to consider. And I call them event design principles because I think it sounds cool. No, I've wrapped them up into 4 core principles. And I feel and I'm more than happy to hear from you guys if you think that I've not thought of something, because I'd love to get some feedback on this as well. But these are our 4 core principles, and I'll explain now a little bit about them. So the 4 core principles are commercial, experience, operations, and safety, not necessarily in that order. And I'm just now going to go through each one a little bit to give you a bit of a rundown on what I mean. I won't go into a huge amount of detail of each one, but I think hopefully you'll get the gist. I mean, already I'm sure they sort of tell you what they are. But if we start on safety, because as I say, one of my first qualifications I did was a NEBOSH qualification. And so I guess because of that, and we all know safety first, so that's why this kind of is the first one we're going to look at. And when I talk about safety, when we're looking at designing event sites, I'm talking about things like evacuation. So how are we evacuating the people from our site? So that could be a festival, that could be a concert, that could be an exhibition. I think we looked there was a lot of others. I'm curious to know what the category in the poll of other meant. Maybe it's concerts or corporate gigs or something. But regardless of the event, evacuation, super important. How are we getting them out? What are the evacuations routes? What are the places of safety? What about the actual exit routes, the gates or the exit doors themselves? And then capacity actually is the site or is the venue actually big enough? Or is it too big? Which is probably more of an operational or a commercial thing. But so have you got enough capacity, and not just in the overall site, but in terms of the different areas that you might create within that site? And that could be like the viewing area of a stage. It could be the capacity in or outside of maybe a temporary venue like a big top. Looking at the fire safety, so fire risk, and there we're talking about we're talking about fire exits, but we're also talking about the hazards of fire. So things like, where are you putting your catering units, or do you have sufficient fire gaps, or where are you putting your generators? It's always having a think about those. And then general safety, by that I mean the general, the slips, the trips and falls, and I guess that's a sort of an overarching anything that doesn't fall into the other three categories. Okay, so next, looking at operations. And so by operations, I really do mean the running of the event, the spit and sawdust side of the event, which I suppose is what I spend most of my life doing. And by that, I'm talking about the access. So how are we getting to the various parts of the site? If you've got a campsite in your event, how are we getting there? If you've got a stage, how are we getting to the back of that? That links a little bit onto servicing, because servicing, we need to be thinking about where are you placing your toilets and can we service them? And that's not just, okay, if it rains, you're going to need some trackway or good road to be able to get to those toilets, to be able to empty them. If you don't have that for whatever reason, how else are you going to service it? Are you going to need to use tractors? Like what are your options with that? But also, wherever you place them, you've got to be able to get to them when you need to service them. So, for example, if they're in public spaces, have you thought about how you're going to get through the pedestrians with that? Is it going to be safe to do that? But also, you might need to think about scheduling on that. And then logistics is we're talking about how we're going to get to the various production areas. How's production going to operate? And that also leads on to sort of stewarding and security. And security sort of falls into safety as well. Obviously, security plays a very important role within the safety of the site in the event, but there's also an asset management and asset security element to it as well. So they'll be managing the backstage and the production areas, as well as managing the public safety. And then we've got experience, and by experience, I'm talking about the public experience. And so we're thinking there about attendee journey. How are the people getting into site? How are they navigating from, where they access the site, or maybe from the campsite or from the car park? What is the journey? How are they? How is that journey? Is it an enjoyable journey? And that falls into other elements like circulation. Have you got good circulation around your site? Have you considered that maybe where you've got the main routes in, you've got a wider, more open space, because they could potentially be the pinch points. But also you haven't got too many dead ends where you could get lots of people sort of ending up having to sort of turn back, and then you've got crowds kind of going against each other. But also it's about the experience of that. So it's, how are people getting around site, and is it an enjoyable experience? Are they kind of getting lost a little bit? Is that part of what you want to achieve? Now, there are some great examples, I think, of the experience element. And some events, it's more important than others, and some organisers put more effort on this than others. But there are some fantastic, more grassroots festivals, as an example, that spend a lot of time thinking about the attendee journey and the circulation, and how people are not just enjoying content of the event, but how they're getting to the content and how they're getting around, and actually that whole experience of being in the event. It isn't just about the music or the workshops or the seminars or whatever you've got in your event. It's about how people are receiving the overall experience of the event. And then access, obviously really important. I've mentioned that before in operations, but we're talking about the public vehicle access into perhaps car parks, or local parking arrangements, but also how are they getting into the site? And have we thought about, if you're going to have queues, have you thought about that they're that you've left enough room for the queue system, or you've got a big enough access point for people to get in, and it isn't they're not waiting there for hours, or maybe you need multiple access points, and are they in the right place? Does it make sense for those access points to be where you've defined them? And then I suppose the overarching one is enjoyment. Like, that's the whole point that we put these events on, is that people are actually enjoying the event. Oh, thanks, Mark. That was smooth. And then we're looking at commercial. And so really important for most events, I would imagine, is the commercial aspect. And so when I talk about commercial, I'm talking about the income generation. So obviously people might buy a ticket, or it might be a free event, but once they're there, whether they bought a ticket or not, usually there's another opportunity to spend more money, and that could be at bars, at traders, at merchandise, and so on. But there's also, it's not just the income, but it's the expenditure of the event, and how we design the event will impact what it costs. And so I put facilities there as an example of that, and that's about, I'm going to take toilets as an example. I feel like I'm going to talk about toilets a lot today. I don't know why. So toilets as an example, if you have 30 toilets next to a main stage, that might not be enough if you've got 10,000 people and that's the only block of toilets that are there. But if you put 100 toilets there, that might be too many. And then if you've only got 20 toilets somewhere else, you might have the right number of toilets. You might have done your calculations and you've got the right number of toilets for your event, but have you put them in the right place that they're maximizing the overall usage where most people are going to be? So, have you got toilets next to the bars, for example? And then obviously when we're looking at bars and traders and merchandise, you might have overarching control. You might be managing the buyers or managing the merchandise, or even managing the traders. But whether you are or not, it's really important that they're in key spots and they're spread out in the right places around the site, that they have the maximum potential to generate the most income and they have the best footfall. Because whether you are taking that income direct or whether they've paid a pitch to be there, ultimately you want them to have a really good experience. But also that links into the public experience as well, because people want the bar next to where they're going to be when they're watching something. So you want a bar next to the stage or where people are hanging out and chatting, and you want food traders to be near that content as well, because that's what they're going to want. They want to have something to eat when they're watching something. So it's overarching as a two-way thing. It isn't just about generating as much income as possible. It's about making the best experience, and people don't have to go and hunt down when they actually want to give you their money. So that's the overarching 4 core principles. And just as an example of how we apply those, I thought it might just be fun to apply them to something which is quite relevant at the moment. So as you can imagine, we're not designing an awful lot of festivals or typical events at the moment. There are a few that we're working on for next year, but most of the events that we're working on for this year are drive-in experiences. And we're doing an awful lot of drive-in cinemas for various clients. So I thought that why not? Let's make it kind of relevant to where we're at the moment. So what I've got here, and this is where I quite like, I'm going to turn on the chat, and I don't know if Mark wants to come back in, because I quite like for you guys to have a little look at this and tell me. So at the top there, actually it's a stage, but it could be a stage, it can be a screen, it doesn't really matter. That's the screen at the top of the page there, and we've got that kind of sight lines either side there. I think there's a whiteboard thing. Let me turn on the whiteboard thing, and I can hopefully be able to do that. That's the sight line down there. Oh, look at that's a straight line there, and you've got another one that goes down there. Can you see that? I don't know if that's working, but anyway, so sight lines either side, and you can see these are all the cars that are parked, and they're they're all parked in nice straight lines. They're double rows, and there's about 5 meters between each double row. So I'm looking at this, and I'd be curious to know what if we think back to the core principles, think back to experience, think about safety, think about commercial, think about operations. And is there anything here the way you think that we can apply some of those principles? Hey Mark, how you doing?
Yeah, no, good. I just wanted to let you know, because I know you're wondering, those annotations are working. Everyone can see them. They're fine.
Great.
So I had to check on the other device, because I'm seeing exactly what you're seeing, but I had to check on the iPad just to make sure it works exactly like we thought it would. So
fantastic.
I think it's a good one to use, because like you said, a lot of us are involved in kind of figuring out drive-in type events at the minute of all shapes and sizes. And for me, every time someone asks me about them, one of the things I try and drill into quite quickly with a client is how they see the parking and the lineup of cars and that management working. Because to me, I find it's often the one that hasn't maybe been given enough consideration, whereas a lot of the rest is quite obvious for people to kind of think about. Whereas how they get cars in, how they line them up, they can think of it quite simply. But then when you maybe point out challenges, that's when, you know, bigger things happen and people start to realize maybe what I was thinking isn't going to work. So I'm like you, I'm kind of keen to want to see what people think of that as a layout or something that could or couldn't work, or if there's any challenges.
Yeah, so I mean, and just a point, because I think I saw someone talk about fire points. So really, this is a very basic plan. What isn't on here is any facilities. There's no toilets. There's no catering units. There's nothing like that. I just want to focus on the layout for this particular exercise. And some of the things that I'm thinking about here is, well, let's have a look at safety firstly. Well, okay, 5 meters, that might be a bit tight, but overall, what I do know is if we assume there's good fire lanes between each double row, I know I can if there's any issue with a car, I can drive vehicles forward or backwards to get them out. If any vehicle wants to leave for any reason, any one of these vehicles can leave. And nice straight lines, easy to get out. And then I'd be looking at operational. So operational, well, this is a breeze because it's nice straight lines, easy peasy. I can just park them up and there's no problem at all. And then I have a little look at commercial. Well, look, I'm maximizing the space here because they're all facing in the same way, and that's super easy. I'm just like, I could probably squeeze in a few more at the front, but ultimately, in terms of the layout, commercially, this is great. And then I have a little look at experience. Okay, well, if I have a think about, if you think about that each of these cars is probably about 4.5, 5 meters long, and you've got this many rows, and as I say, you've got 5 meter bays. Now, from here, if I go all the way back to here, that is a long way away. And so at the moment, if you have a look at this car down here, what this guy is going to be looking at this screen, sort of pretty much.
Annotating again, because people.
I'm not annotating. No, okay. I could annotate, couldn't I?
Because people aren't seeing when you said this car.
Of course. Okay,
I know what you mean.
So yeah. So this.
There's a lot of good questions coming in the chat. People are thinking a lot of good questions that are the types of things you and I, and maybe they would be throwing at clients as well. And
brilliant.
You know, do people have to stay in their cars? Are they given a spot in advance, or is it come in and you get parked up? Shouldn't there be space in the middle in front of the stage? So there's a lot of good questions coming in, which are, again, I think are the types of things we would all be discussing with clients. Brilliant. And making.
I'm just having a look now, and I can see that. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, it depends on the event. Actually, some clients are allowing vehicles to leave. I mean, ultimately, if they want to leave, we can't stop them, and you need to have a way to manage that. So it's a really good point, though, and this particular layout lends itself to that, so anyone can get out at any point. And then our tickets sold.
Good question there from Linda, which is one I've brought up with a client as well along the way, is how do you manage car size? I mean, like, I looked out the day I got a call about this, I looked out my front window here, and my Discovery Jeep versus my better half's 3 Series BMW, if I'm the car parked in front of her, that's a big impact on her experience. Yeah, so that's an interesting one. Have you seen a way whereby people are indicating what their car is or something? How do you, or do you just manage it on site when they turn up, and that there's a system in place that bigger things go this way? And how are people doing that and dealing with it?
Two elements. There's a few things to look at. So firstly, there is on many clients are limiting the type of vehicles you can bring. You can't bring your camper van, you can't bring your motorhome, and that's usually done on either specs on what you can and can't bring, and also the number of people that you put in the car. So you can, some are allowing up to sort of 7-seaters, which might be like a Q7, some sort of Land Cruiser type thing. The other thing is that all of these vehicles are staggered, so you probably can't see it because it's quite small, but each row behind it, actually the car's looking in between the two cars there, so you can actually see directly in. Now again,
did pick up on that in the chat actually quicker than I did. It took me longer, but I think someone mentioned that in the chat, that they liked that it was staggered.
Yeah, and I think, I saw an interesting question. I can't remember what it was now. It made me think about something. Where are they? Oh, I don't know. Was it that? No, I can't remember. But yeah, so the other thing I am thinking about here is they are staggered. So any of these cars here that are directly looking at the screen, they've got a great view because this is staggered. Now, I think that was it. Someone was talking about what the height of the screen is. A really good point. It needs to be a reasonable height because you are at some point going to be looking over another vehicle. But of course, you want that vehicle to be a little bit away from you. So if we take this one here, for example, the next vehicles are at least 5 meters away. And so that's your sight line there. Now, these guys are great. They've got pretty good sight lines, depending on the size of the screen. But these guys over here, even though it's staggered, of course, they're now looking over there. And they're now looking at they're pretty much looking at the side of their car, which is probably great for the passenger or the driver, depending on which side you're on. But everyone else in the vehicle is having a really crap time. So I'm just going to turn this off a minute and move on to the next slide. So then we look at a different design. Now we're looking at sort of a radial design. Now this looks very pretty. And if we look at, now we still got our fire lanes, and maybe we put another one in the middle because that's a really long way to go. Is
that the same number of cars, Rupert?
Yeah, same number of cars. Yeah. So you can already see that we've kind of, again, we've probably maximized commercially. We've maximized the space even more because we're sort of we're utilizing the edges there. Although often it depends on the site. It depends on the overall shape of the field. And in terms of the visibility, great, because all these cars are now pointing and you're looking directly at your windscreen at the screen. Ideal. I don't know if there are any car parkers, traffic managers in at the moment, but I don't know if anyone fancies trying to park cars like this.
Yeah, that would be your friend.
There, you would not be friends. So trying to get cars, and now I with the technology that we use, with the GPS technology that we use, it's centimeter precision. I'll come on to this a little bit later. So in terms of marking this out, not a problem. But try and get a car to park on that line at the right angle, I reckon you might struggle. So that was some of the things that I've been thinking about on how we lay it out. I don't know if anyone else has come in with any other points. I'd be curious to know.
There's a lot of good points, and again, just the types of questions. People are right; these are the types of questions you'd have to ask and consider, which they're kind of spanning your 4 principles, but people are just throwing out what they think.
Right.
A very good question: are there search requirements on entry? So how do you do the search function when you're driving stuff and they're theoretically staying in their car kind of vibe?
It's a really interesting one. I can't go into all the specifics, but we've been looking at ones both in England and in Wales where there are different approaches on, and obviously it's down to what police are asking for as well. There's a mixed bag. Sometimes we're doing full searches, sometimes we're doing spot checks, but normally we have a process in place where there's sort of a sin bin which people will be directed into if they're either identified or if that's the stage to go through. And more often than not, we'll give plenty of time in advance of the screen showing to allow people to go through that process, and we'll be able to get them through, be able to check them, ticket them up, get them into the right sort of, if we've got the space, a right sort of holding bay nearly. before we actually bring them into the dock. I think someone else was saying, do you allocate a specific space?
Yeah.
And God, no, because that would be a total nightmare. You park from the front back, because otherwise you're trying to get vehicles going in between other vehicles, and you have spaces all over the place.
The other challenge, I suppose, with something like this is, much like conference centers and large seating areas, is if you're bang in the middle, say you have a brilliant straight on view of the screen, but you need to go to the toilet. Chances are you have the longest walk. I'm assuming if your toilets are left and right, if they're edge located, so you're going to have the longest trek to get there. So you're playing one thing, and if you've got kids, maybe you don't want to be that far from the toilets. And I know of instances where the ingress is held up because of these conversations and things. And if it's a kids movie thing, it's a completely different scenario in lots of respects, because maybe you want to consider not having them that far from toilets. Otherwise, mommy and daddy are not going to have a good experience when each of the three kids suddenly decides at different times they need to go to the bathroom and stuff. So there's so much to consider depending on your audience as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing to think about is the reason we're doing this is that we're in this pandemic right now. And so we're also having to think about social distancing. Now, whilst they're in their cars, that's absolutely fine. But when we have to get them to their facilities, you quite rightly say they're smack bang in the middle, and the toilets are absolutely left and right. And we need sufficient space for them to be able to get in and out. We also need to think about signage, and are we asking people to stay left? Do we have arrows on the ground to get them to have decent one-way systems? We've looked at other options where we actually have people. So let me come on to the next slide, actually. So we looked at this. I think great experience, awful at parking. I saw someone, I think I saw James or someone say nightmare. Yes. So then we've looked at this option. Now, this is kind of a halfway house. This has actually got 5 angles. We've done them with 3 angles, and that's a lot easier. There's probably some areas where it's a bit more challenging, but what we're now asking is 5 clear angles to park on, and that is a lot easier to manage. Now, not shown on this one, I ask my CAD guy to put this together really quickly. We normally have fire lanes that will go, let me put on my whiteboard again. And we normally run some fire lanes that sort of go down here in between each sort of section. So you've got some good lanes, and that sort of splits it up a little bit and makes it good access all the way around. But this is much easier to park up, and again, though, you've still got the same issue of facilities either side. We also put facilities at the back. Depends on the venue, depends on the number of cars. Incidentally, we're not doing a cinema of this scale. We're doing concerts of this, driving concerts of this scale, but the cinemas they're sort of usually maxing out about 300, 250, 300. Interesting to know what people think of this particular setup. Much you would struggle with any traffic management here to do this. Yeah, it's easier, but it's not. It's still got a little bit more of a challenge on it. But we're having discussed with the organisers and with the guys that are going to be parking. There is a way around this. Again, if there's a clear definition, if there's a fire lane all the way down here, and in these routes, so we really split them up, then there's 5 clear angles to park on, which is a lot simpler than trying to park them in a radial or obviously in a straight is simpler, but not as good experience. But at least here, they're not perfect in terms of the angle, but they are they're pretty good. These guys here are now facing the right way. Right then, I'm just gonna apologies if I miss any chat, because I'm gonna try and focus on the slides a little bit. So let's move on. So I know I've been gibbering quite a bit. Oh, let's clear that. Okay, so let me turn off that again. There we go. So I just want to have a little chat about the technology that we use, which gets applied to some things like that. And we, in event site design, we use a number of different tools. First one I'll talk about is how we do GPS surveying. And so that's me. That was last year and at Bowood House. and stunning, looking at that blue sky. Oh, good time. So you can see there I've got in my hand a GPS survey. In fact, it's not GPS, it's GNSS. And it runs on a local network called RTK. All that means is I get a really, really high precision accuracy, and in fact, it's sub-centimeter accuracy. So more than sufficient for that sort of greenfield site. But what that allows me to do is be really complex and accurate with the mark out. So I can get cabins and marquees or whatever really close to each other. I can be really specific with underground services, and it means that I can be really bang on with it. It comes in basically up here. You've got a receiver. That's the satellites come in and talk to that. It's got a SIM card in this device here, which is this bit here, which is the controller, and it works like a sat nav really. And it's really easy to use. Honestly, you look at it and it tells you where you are, and you've got the map, the site plan showing up on the screen, and you walk, and the little icon, just like on a sat nav, shows you where you are on the map, and you can zoom in, you can pick a point to mark, and all of that. So they're really, really easy to use. A very expensive piece of kit, but you can hire them as well. And then just next to me is that's my little mark out trolley that I didn't make. I sort of designed in collaboration with an amazing engineer who whipped this together really quickly for me. It's actually an old golf trolley, but that holds all of my flags and my paint and my tape measures, because sometimes I get the tape measures out, do a little bit of trigonometry if I've got to do some manual marking out, or sometimes I just a bit of nostalgic feeling. Now, I wanted to show you an example of a couple of things, example of the accuracy of that technology. So this is a site plan of one of the events I work on, and you can see what I want you to do. In fact, let me turn on I'm loving this whiteboard feature. I just want to have a look at this, and whilst I'm going to switch to the next slide, before I do, just focus on some different elements. So you could focus on this big top here. You could focus on this big top here. You could focus on this sort of trader block here. You can have a look at any number of bits. Just kind of, just kind of have a little look at so focus on some areas as I switch the slide, but this is a CAD plan. We then import the CAD plan into TopCon is the equipment that we use, by the way. So into the TopCon equipment, and then we go and mark out, and then it looks like this. So this, in fact, we also use drones, and we use mapping technology where just before we open up, we do it's not one image, it's hundreds, sometimes thousands of images that are all stitched together. And before we open, before there's anyone on site, we zoom over and we take a picture like this. And it's massively useful because we usually get it processed usually before the end of the day, the first day. So we've got it available to actually use operationally. But you can see here, if I just switch backwards and forwards, and you have a look at those different elements, and you can see how accurate it is. It's remarkable, really. And as I say, it's sub-centimeter accuracy, and it's great just to give you that example of how it actually looks on the ground. But sometimes, obviously, you'll make changes on the ground and you won't replot it, you won't change the site plan. And by having an image like this, it's so useful because you actually go, oh, hang on a minute, no, we decided we were going to move that particular stage 10 meters, and we can overlay this image onto the CAD plan and make the changes, so we don't actually have to go out on the ground and resurvey any points. We do that sometimes as well. So anyway, that's quite good. Let me turn that off. Right. So the next bit is I'm going to do a screen share, and again, another bit of an interactive thing. And let me try and screen share this now. Hopefully this will work. I'm hoping you all see that. Now I might need Mark to come back in if he's available to check in with how people are doing. So the point of this, what we've got here, is a pretty much an empty plan. I want you to use your imagination a little bit, because this is just an arena. It might look quite familiar because we were just looking at this arena before, and we're going to build a slightly different event in it this time. So I just thought it would be quite fun. This is AutoCAD that I'm using here, but I've got things sort of set up, so it's a bit of drag and drop play. We're going to build ourselves a little arena event, sort of bit of a festival. And I want you to be thinking about the core principles of design that we've been discussing. So commercial, safety, operations, experience. Now, a couple of things to think about. We've got 3 entrances that are predefined. So these green arrows. And we've got day parking is up here, is sort of up in that direction. Camping's down below. And then just a note that we've got residential off to the right in the lower parts here. So you need to be thinking about that. So Mark, I don't know if anyone's come in yet. So the first thing I normally do when it's a festival is think about the venue. So where are people going to experience? Maybe it's a stage, maybe it's a big top. And now this particular one, if I zoom out, what I've got here is I've got a stage. I'm just going to zoom in. I've got a stage here to position somewhere. I've got a big top, very colourful big top here. I've got another venue over there. I've got another little venue here. I've got some toilets to place. I've got some trackway to place, and I've got these are sort of trader blocks. They could be caterers, they could be non-caterers. I've also got some bars to place. So bars at this sort of colour here. There's a few of those. As well as that, of course, as well as the exits that we've already got, I've also got a fire exits to think about as well. So from my point of view, often because we're designing an event which is about the experience, it's about the enjoyment, it's about people getting the maximum entertainment out of this event. So that's the first thing we're thinking about is as they come into the site, what's the best experience for them to be having? If we have a look at this, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 key venues here to be thinking about putting into this space. So I don't know if anyone's made any comments yet on where they think, if we started with perhaps the main stage. So I can just drag that main stage.
A lot of the comments are, it's great to see event sites being done in something other than Google Maps and PowerPoint. I think a lot of us, again, depends on the client and the scale of event, to be fair. But again, as Andrew says, often it's Google Maps and some colouredy squares plonked onto it is about the height of what we're given sometimes to make an event work. So I think a lot of people are enjoying the precision you can achieve with the way you go at it. Now, again, I'm sure you don't do full massive CAD for every small event, but
now I suppose that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's what we do. That's a given for me. Okay. But having said that, I regularly use Google My Maps. So I don't know if anyone's played around with Google My Maps, but that's a fantastic piece of kit. It's completely free to use. And in terms of visualize and conceptualize an event, we use that all the time with clients, because you can just quickly draw on it. You can both see what's happening. You can share those plans, and it's a good starting point, because at that point we can go, okay, well, we need to buy that ordnance survey, or we need to run a survey in that area. Pardon me.
No, I'd have to say my maps can be really helpful, especially on events where either the budget isn't there to get into CAD, which is sometimes the case, let's be honest. But the other thing we would use my maps a lot for and find it very good for is if you're doing a sprawling event across a city, like a mass participation or a parade or something, and you need to visually represent, road closures, barrier points, security points, access points, police points, and all this, but you're across a whole city. My maps is a very easy visual way to do that. That again is you can just share with all the relative stakeholders. You do it kind of in layers, a bit like CAD, so you can just send the security company their stuff, or they can turn on where the barriers are going as well, which you've sent to Actavo or whoever's doing your barriers. So my maps can be really, really helpful, and is a step beyond, just Google Maps and colouredy blocks, as Andrew says. My maps feels and it's got measurements and stuff in it. Like, it feels more, it's a lot more useful. It's like along the spectrum towards CAD.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
not CAD. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely that. And I mean, there are now a couple of event-specific online tools where they're integrating blocks that you can kind of place around. There are a couple. I don't know. I haven't played enough around with them to really know, but MyMaps is free to use, so because it's part of Google. So as you say, and it's got all the measurements, so it kind of works as that base point. And personally, I wouldn't, depending on the event, I don't think I've ever done an event without a CAD plan, but I wouldn't be using MyMaps to do accurate plans, that's for sure. So I think I saw Fraser mention main stage bottom right corner with back of stage facing residential areas. So you've obviously spotted the hint that I mentioned. Absolutely, we need to be thinking about the residentials and making sure that we don't have our main stage where it's going to have the speakers are outside. Yes, they're going to be line array. They're going to be directional, but still there's a spread of noise. However, if I put it bottom right, you've got the access. I'll just zoom in. You've got an access there, which means you've basically got an entrance sort of right next to the stage, and that's either going to cause some issues with pinch points, because that will be the main point that everyone's going to use when they leave or enter the stage. That could be an issue. So I personally want to push the stage further away from the exit, so there's a bit more of a lead up. So I am going to follow Fraser a little bit, but I'm actually going to put it just a little bit further up. I'm going to put it about here. So the residential's here and here, it's facing in that direction. That keeps it a little bit facing away from residential. So now I've got my main stage there. I want to be thinking about where I want the other venues. So what I don't want is, I don't want to put another main venue like this one here. Let's do this one. I don't want to put a main venue right next to my other main stage. If it's here, there's just going to be a massive noise bleed. There's also going to be a crowd issue because they're going to be interfering with each other. And again, I could put it up here away from the exit, but again, the same problem. So we've got a few options. Of course, we could put it up here. We could put it over here. For now, I'm just going to put it down here. Why am I going to put it here? It's a sort of good access. It's obviously it's an inside venue, so it doesn't have as much spill out as a main stage would. I'll zoom in a little bit. So it doesn't have as much spill out. So in terms of it being nearer an exit, it's not so much of an issue. And then I've got another couple of venues to place. So definitely got some room up here. And again, so I've got a venue down here. I've got a venue over here. So nice to spread them out. Now, another option is I could put it straight in the middle, but of course, thinking about my principle of operations and thinking about logistics, how am I going to service that for backline, getting the artists to and from there, getting the trucks to and from there. So I want it to be near this big perimeter road that I've got going all the way around it, very handy. So again, with this one, I don't want to put it in the middle because again, I'm going to have the same problem. I want it to have good access throughout, and I want to have a secure area as well out the back of it. So I've got a nice sort of spot about, put it about here or something.
There's a more kind of fundamental query on this one has come up there as you're placing things. Just wondering about the logic behind camping beside residential. Just thinking of noise and rubbish and stuff like that. Does that work? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're not in this particular instance. Actually, I'm making it up a little bit. There is some residential actually near the camping and down this area, but they are part of this estate, so it isn't as much of an issue. It's not no issue at all by any stretch of the imagination. But they're also, even though they're in that direction, they're not necessarily next to each other. So there is a decent separation. But absolutely, very good point, and it's definitely an issue in many of events that we work on, is getting that balance right of not wanting the arena, not wanting where the main noise is, but at the same time, camping areas create the noise, create the pollution, create the rubbish, and they tend to be the less prettier part to look at of an event as well. And definitely residents don't like to look upon that
depends on the event, depends on the festival, and they definitely don't like to look at it on the Monday morning. Although I have to say this particular event that site we're working on was pretty fresh by Monday, but it all depends on who's going, doesn't it?
Fresh is a lovely word.
Okay, so I don't know. I can't read all the comments whilst I'm doing this, I'm afraid. But
No, Matt has given away the secret there and told people the what 3 words address of where this is. If anyone wants to investigate further,
by all means do.
Solomon has an interesting point there. You could look at designating the camping area that's near the residence as quiet camping. You know, the way a lot of bigger festivals will have one of those sections. So
great idea. Absolutely.
It can often make sense that if something does need to be closer to residential than other, that it's the family or the quiet or whatever version you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right, so I'm going to place my last venue. So I've got kind of a spot in the corner just down here. And I'm just going to put it about here. I'm obviously not being very precise with this, but normally we would be. I'm just kind of plonking them around. So there we go. We've got sort of a good surround going on there. And the other thing, so I've managed to fit a bar in here with this one here. So there's a bar next to a venue. That makes sense. I probably want to fill in these points here. So what I've got here is I've got 3 kind of trader blocks, and I'm just going to try and move all those at the same time. And I'm going to fill in the middle with trader blocks. Now, of course, by doing this, I am potentially causing a problem because I've now got trader blocks and all the track is around the edge. But if I don't have anything in the middle, it's just going to be this huge open space. And we do still want to have good access to these areas. So budget permitting, we would put some trackway in there. So here's some I made earlier. And it's going to go something like that, probably. Probably not quite right, is it? But there we go. It's... There we go. So there we go. So we've got some good trackway that goes through those 3 satellite blocks, so we can still access them even when it rains.
Andrew has a good question there, just more general one. Seeing as what 3 words come up, do you guys integrate that into any of your planning or your CAD yet? Are you finding much use for it? We don't want to be an ad for what 3 words, but a lot of people are using it a good bit. So have you found a benefit to that, or with you guys doing such precision stuff anyway, is there on your end, is there much of a use for it?
We do integrate it into some of our plans if the client wants it. There is actually there's a plugin for AutoCAD that allows you to integrate what 3 words among other options, so you can actually identify certain areas, and that can be really useful, definitely. Do I find it useful? I've used it at, I think I may well, when we were working together at Glastonbury, did we use it on the year that you were there? Yeah. And we gave it a go. I think that was in its infancy. It's obviously moved on a little bit now. I think it has its purposes. I think its future plans are to be more integrated into apps that we already use. And it's at that point that it will become incredibly useful. Yep. The fact that you have to use a separate app means that only some people will benefit from it. Also, in my view, it means that you need everyone's buy-in, and that can be one of the biggest challenges, is trying to get all stakeholders, and that's from local authorities, police, fire, medical. They all need to buy into it, as well as all the operational teams as well. So it's useful, but I think with a decent grid over your site plan, and sometimes actually if people know the event, then a good landmark will get them quicker than trying to work out what 3 words you're at.
Tamara has made a very, I know people are fed up hearing me say this. I love the conversations that develop in the chat. So Tamara is just making the point, you also need to make sure that your quiet campsite is indeed quieter, i.e. from marina noise bleed, as well as from other nearby campsites. You can't only designate a quiet campsite based on proximity to residential. And that's, I suppose, that Tamara kind of speaks to the juggling we do with all elements of site, where it might make sense to put X over there and Y over there, but for other reasons that causes you a problem, or it costs far too much in extra trackway, so maybe you need to put them elsewhere. Like, there's so much to balance when you're designing a site.
Absolutely. And I did this site plan really quickly just to have a play and get people thinking about it, it isn't necessarily entirely well thought out. I just saw I think the other point on the quiet camping is also you need to make sure, not wanting to deal with this too much, but you need to make sure that the people that go in there are also using it as quiet camping. And that's about stewarding, that's about the right message, about signage. Because if it's not quiet, if the people aren't in there aren't being quiet, then everyone's going to be kicking off. Solomon's mentioned about access to these trader blocks during live. 100%, you're right. You are definitely going to want to restrict access for restocking and servicing during out of hours time. So this arena will close down overnight, and at that point, before you open up in the morning, you want to be able to give people access to do all of that. But you don't want vehicles driving in and out across the public unless you can, if you can avoid it.
Trackway route, when the public aren't in there, will be the busiest place, and can often, as we all know, present and represent more challenges than when the public were in there during the day. So again, if you don't get designed for that access to traders right, I mean, I always find it interesting that out of the 4 principles you guys use, that the commercial is in there. And there was a question that came in earlier on that we'll get to actually about that. But I think if you're not seen to be factoring it in at that high level and very much considering, how to get these people restocked so that they can make more money, the knock-on effect of happy traders. And I'm conscious that in a lot of our webinars, traders come up and they do cause us challenges as a general group, like traders, and sometimes the way some of them operate, and with the food safety and all that kind of stuff. So we talk about that bit a lot, but I think it's worth noting, and yours identifies it as one of your key 4 principles, which is good, is that a lot of events don't happen unless there is this commercial and trading element of it. And like every other element of events within traders, there's good, there's bad, there's middling, there's I'm having a bad day, there's I've just come off another site and I'm late, there's all of that. But you do need to factor them in and make sure they have access and they can restock, because no event organizer wants to be dealing with the traders who said they've run out of stock on day 1 and they haven't been able to restock for day 2. That they're literally looking at money walking away unless they can get their stock back in. So that trackway, it's often one of the first guaranteed spends on trackway that I find with clients is, right, just make sure first of all we can restock traders and then tell me where else I need trackway.
100%. And what I find interesting, because I do horse shows as well, so we look after I used to do Badminton, which is just down the road from me, but we also look after Chatsworth horse trials, and we look after Blenheim horse trials. And their perception of traders, or they call them trade stands, are entirely different to the festival world. Yeah. And in fact, they are the life and blood of horse trials, because that shopping village is critical. They need to look really good. They need to be looked after, and they are part of they're nearly part of the management and the the planning. They are considered in so much different light, because exactly that, they are probably the biggest income. Horse trials don't make an awful lot of money unless you're right at the top, like Badminton and Burley and things. They don't make any money. So all their money is coming from trade stands, sponsorship, and obviously, tickets as well is obviously critical, but they need to get those trade stands in as well. So really interesting how they're completely different perception. We come to a festival like bloody traders.
You want to be careful bringing the attitude from one to the other. It's not going to serve
absolutely,
you. Charlie has a good question there. What do you allow? And again, look, let's talk about traders for festivals, I guess. What do you allow each trader for stock vehicles? Do you often end up with central stores or shared fridge trucks?
Depends on the event, depends on the space. So with some events, we'll provide more sort of corporate events, I suppose, we'll provide full storage solution, usually bring in a company that will look after that, and a massive sort of cool storage as well. And everyone stores it in there. No one's allowed vehicles on site.
Sorry, I just got given out to by my 3-year-old because I referenced Charlie Mussett, because he said that question, and my daughter's name is Charlotte and I call her Charlie. So I got roared from the other side of the room going, "Dad, why are you talking about me?" Like, I'm not talking about you. It's a different Charlie. Mark Donovan has a question there as well. We're drifting into the questions, which is good because they're relative to this.
Yeah.
would you have a stationary section for first aid, ambulance and stuff? Yeah, and you probably would. Yeah, I think as Rupert said, he's thrown this together for kind of illustration purposes. There's probably a lot of little elements that there's no welfare. You know what I mean? There'll be other things that are probably here.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, because this is a very camping event, the main medical isn't actually in the arena, but there is some station points in the arena, and it will depend, on the event. Obviously, if you can get the main medical within good distance to the arena, then that's ideal. If it can service both, then obviously cost effective operationally, that makes sense. If you can't, if there's that much separation, then you need to think about having two separate tents. But obviously 2 separate units means more staffing, more marquees, more facilities, more power. So it's that balance. But you're not gonna not do it only because it costs too much money.
No. Well, obviously, yeah. Peter is wondering, would you guys normally do a grid reference for your sites?
Yeah, all the time. Obviously, it depends on the client, but for the events that I look after, we'll always use a grid referencing system.
Yeah, it's funny. We used to generally, before I suppose we started working with you guys, even we would tend to always use them as well because they were helpful. But we reached a point actually over here where some companies used them, some companies didn't, and some of the agencies, and the fire service in particular, just simply started to insist that all plans had grids on them, just as a general rule, because it fascinates me why you wouldn't. But anyway, I can't think of a reason you wouldn't, but just out of habit, I suppose a lot of people hadn't started putting grid overlays on them. And again, as you're getting into more complex events happening in strange sites, so that a grid overlay can be the making or break. I mean, I've spent a few hours trying to decide on grid overlays and how wide the boxes are, and you know what I mean? Like, that's important stuff too, because depending on the scale of your plan and the detail and everything, that it's you can't just plonk the same overlay grid onto every plan. It's not going to work. So when you start running out of letters in the alphabet, it can look messy, but maybe you need to do it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the other things that we can do is not for all of the grids, but if you've got a gridded plan, we can pick a grid and pick a 3 meter by 3 meter square within that grid, and then apply a what 3 word to that. So at least when people look at a plan, there you might have several points, and you go, oh, I'm next to this what 3 words. You go, oh, okay, fine. And then you can use the what 3 word app. So that's that integration there with the gridded system and the what 3 words.
Quite handy, actually. Steve is wondering, again, a bit more of a general question. How do you ascertain the amount of traders required? Is there a ratio to capacity, or do event owners just tell you how many they need? Or is it sometimes the event organizer saying, we're putting in this many because I need to charge that much money?
It's witchcraft. You know what? No, it's not that for starters. It's a really good question, because it's something to get right. And you can have too many traders, and great, you've got your pitch fees and you're happy. But if you haven't got enough people, so if you bring in too many caterers and you haven't got enough people spending money, then they're not going to be happy, because they're not earning what they're hoping to. And that's part of a trade manager's job or a sales manager's, depending on what company it's in and what the sort of roles are, and it does vary massively. But that's really critical. It's getting the right number for the right number of people, and then where you're going to put them. Yeah, and also the types as well, making sure you don't want a whole load of people that are doing pizzas and a whole load of people that are doing chips. You want a good variation. Now, of course,
I was just going to say, for some of the larger events we do, our starting point is actually what offerings we want.
Yeah.
We want to, so from an enjoyment and an experience perspective, what do we want available? Then you kind of maybe rank which will be the busiest, most popular offerings. And then that leads you on to, okay, bottom line, lots of people will still want burgers and chips. So we need this many of those units. We need to cater for vegan. We need to cater for this, but maybe not as many of them. So often, again, it's a balancing act. Often we would start with, what do we want them to be able to get? And then we figure out how many of each of them we need or whatever. Like some of them, it's a learning curve too. Like, I didn't realize some of the big events we do, I didn't realize until a few years ago, in some respects, you can't have enough ice cream trucks. Because weather doesn't matter. Eating ice cream or getting a cold drink, which the ice cream trucks generally tend to have, they're not a function of weather necessarily. And we'd have ice cream operators going, let me put like my 15 trucks in. And you're like, Jesus, I don't think we need 15. So you put 4 or 5 in, and then you do find yourself afterwards. Years ago, I remember thinking, I probably shouldn't have let you put 15, but I'd say 10 would have worked.
Yeah.
Because people don't want to walk far to find the cold drink or the ice cream cone, I've discovered.
I think
people shouting, ice cream vans in the chat.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that when it comes to ice cream vans, let's not go there. But I mean, you're right.
Bad stories about as well.
It's one of those things where you're going to get the advice of the ice cream. You're going to tell them what the capacity is, and they're going to suggest how many ice cream vans they put in. And you're going to tell them where to go, and then you're going to turn around and they're going to move. So yeah, good luck with that. We found a brilliant ice cream provider for Blenheim, who actually, when you said be there, don't go anywhere else, and tell me if you feel like you want to move, and they actually did. They didn't move until they spoke to you. So, this is amazing. This is unheard of.
I refuse to believe that. The one thing I think with ice cream trucks that works for them is generally, and I say generally, but quite often for the bigger events, you're dealing with one supplier who is putting in multiple trucks. So what you don't sometimes then have is the argument over, 4 different suppliers, who's in the best spot, who's paying what. And if you're dealing with one guy, say, who's putting in 10, he will understand that his profit is an overall thing. It's not 4 units didn't make me much money.
Yeah.
Or if one guy only has 2 in there and they don't make money, you've now pissed him off. Whereas if one guy has 10 and 6 are profitable and the 4 others hold their own, overall he's won. But if you have a load of smaller numbers of operators in there, it can be really messy.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't. Yeah, you'd only ever have one. Also, you'd get in turf wars. It'd be awful. But I mean, what you will find though is they won't just accept. They'll be monitoring it like live. It'll be dynamic monitoring, and if they decide one ice cream van isn't doing very well, the great thing about ice cream vans in their mind is you can move it right then. Whereas if you're a trader and you're all set up, you can't move. Yeah. But they're like, can we just go there instead because there's a better footfall there?
Yeah. But you're right. It's that thing about, again, we all acknowledge that one of the beautiful things with ice cream vans is they are mobile. Managed movement, please. Don't just let me round the corner and suddenly find you've moved to the other side of the arena. Go, how did you do that? My young lad walked in front there and we drove over. It was fine. Okay, thanks for
yeah, exactly.
There is a question, and sorry, it was sent to me privately, so you won't have seen it.
Okay.
Please ask Rupert what would happen if, when placing the concert next to residential, will it cause a problem with nearby authority and stuff? Yeah, well, I suppose it's like Rupert doesn't, I suppose, just decide to plonk it beside residential without the local authority and residents being involved in a conversation. So I guess it's about doing what you can and getting agreement that, look, we're this close to you. Here's what we're going to be doing. And hopefully you can get the thing across the line, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, also we're working with noise management specialists, so we're not making that decision on our own. And it's all down to the particular site as well. We've worked on sites where the residents are really excited and really on board, and that's really, really important. But if you get some residents that aren't happy and they're in the fallout area of where the noise is likely to be, then you've got a much harder process, consultation process. You've got to work with local authorities who, some are more clued up on others than others on the law, noise management law. And also you just need a really good consultant to be working with you to manage that.
I had to hear and try and do some negotiation with a 3-year-old that I did not win.
So just to finish off on here before we get too distracted, because this is kind of towards the end anyway, but there's so many other things to think about here. So whilst we were chatting, I just added some bars.
You knew this was going to happen.
Well, I know.
People want to know who the good ice cream supplier is.
No.
I think to save any of us getting in trouble, I would suggest you email Rupert and ask him. Or contact him on LinkedIn. He may share that. I am not going to ask him
what the company name is. But if you drop me a message on LinkedIn, I will try and dig out who it is. But if they don't behave as well as they did with me, then it's not my fault.
You don't get to blame Rupert. Chris is actually asking, do you take in all this site planning, do you guys, when you're doing it, would you be thinking of crowd dynamics and stuff like that at that early stage? Or is
100%.
someone else kind of you do?
No, 100%. I'm no expert. I've done crowd science courses, and obviously I've been around events for many years, but it's a consultation. But we're instantly thinking about that. We're not just designing the site to make it look pretty. We're considering the how people are going to flow in and out. Is there sufficient capacity? Where are the pinch points likely to be? We'll make those preliminary decisions, and then of course part of the consultation process and checking that, sort of proofing that design really is going to be including the safety team, whoever that may be, if it's not specifically us anyway.
Yeah, I get you.
And then just other things that we haven't really touched on this plan is, so bars, we've obviously spread those out. Now we've got a bar that's over here. Is that the right place? Maybe not. Maybe you might want it a little bit closer to these two venues over here. You might want it over here, so you've got a bar next to this big venue here, and this is a bit out on its own. Or maybe the bar sometimes becomes a venue of its own. Got a big beer garden out the front. Maybe there's a little DJ in there. It all depends what the setup is. The other thing to think about is the bar sizes. So have you got a sufficient bar size in certain areas so it's got the capacity to deal with that particular area? For example, the main stage, where most people are going to be, you might have 20, 30,000 people in front of the main stage. And if you've only got one bar and it's not massive, then you're not going to maximize the commercial opportunity there. And then toilets.
You had a very interesting point there that some people may not be clued into, is about the bar maybe being a venue in itself.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's by design, and sometimes that's not by design. We've had big festivals over here where, it's a sponsor, it's a drink brand, it's a sponsor activated thing, but they then grow to be much bigger than anyone ever expected, and they're nearly a mini stage, little arena in themselves, that's completely branded by a spirit or whatever, and they become a core feature of the festival. And now start, they're appearing on plans, and they're spoken about in the same way any of the tents and the stages are, because they do draw their own crowd who just want to stay there and drink.
And then it's a really interesting crossover of, is it a venue or is it a bar? That's absolutely, it's a really interesting one. And then you start getting problems with management and 100%. Really interesting point. And I just read, pardon me, what was it Solomon was saying, talking about the residents and sending them on holiday. We've done that, like giving them tickets, sending them on holiday. We did that I looked after Keswick Mountain Festival, and we used to, there was a couple there that really nice house, and we just send them on holiday. I think in the end he ended up living somewhere else, and he'd send his friends on holiday. I was whatever.
That works.
Whatever. Or they go to a nice hotel or something like that. So that works really well. And the other thing to think about is toilets, as I mentioned before, is those facilities, like where are they going to go? But as I say, it's a really basic plan, and obviously fire escapes. Like obviously we haven't really got. You probably want a fire escape probably over here, but you've also got to think about wherever the exit is. Where's the place of safety? Where are they going if they go out here? Where are they actually going to then end up? How are you going to direct them? I find that a lot with some clients are going, we need exits spread around all the way around the arena. That makes sense. So we've got an exit pretty much in each corner here. But once they're out that exit, then what? What's the plan? How are they? Where are you going to congregate? Are they just going to stand there? In which case you're going to have them backed up. Where's the place of safety?
You're right. It's something that can often be overlooked until it's prompted and people are made think about it. And you hit on it earlier as well. The other thing with toilets is quite often, you plonk a portaloo or a porta potty in lots of places if you could, but what you have to do is consider the servicing of them. And especially if it's a multi-day festival, you're probably going to be doing big banks of toilets, and the odd ones back a stage, back a house for traders and stuff. But in general, people are going to have to walk to a bank of toilets probably to use them, rather than have them, what ideally you just plonk them everywhere and let people get to them. But that's grand until the second day, when the one that was beautiful and close to them yesterday doesn't smell too good and can't be serviced. There's a reason these things are done in blocks for big festivals, I suppose.
And another good point actually is that why am I not putting toilets or as well as why am I not putting venues here is the same reason as I want to have the opportunity to service them whenever I need. If they're being hit really hard and I've got toilets in here, it means I have to bring a massive great tanker into the arena And it might be great to have some toilets here, but the other thing is, of course, this is a really nice key area for caterers, so you're gonna get your most money for putting your caterers in front of the main stage. That's where they all want to be. And in reality, actually, I'd probably make this much wider, because this is where everyone wants to be. And I think I just saw Solomon talk about using bars and other features as management of your egress and your flow rate are so important. That's a massively good point. And it depends on the audience, but you can, and that goes with venues as well, being able to manage the different times. Sometimes it's absolutely critical, certainly as we'll remember from Glastonbury Festival. God, I remember one time when a scheduling was wrong, and we had a problem with one particular area, and it was muddy, and we knew we had, I think it was the other stage was about to finish, and we had a new crowd coming in, and there just wasn't the capacity to deal with it. Then, of course, because it got muddy, we had much less space, and it's that really interesting challenge where you've got that pinch point that's been created by weather, but it's also being created by the schedule. I mean, they do amazing work at Glastonbury now with the scheduling as well. They do the really big high capacity events where that's a massive factor, because when you're looking at 50,000 people moving from one area of the site to another, you need to make sure that you haven't got any clashes there, and you've even got good one-way systems as they do at Glastonbury.
And it's good because even the reality of, and that's a good example, because it brings home the reality of all the good planning and everything. Even that year when I was at Glastonbury and we had the killer mud, so like all the planning and everything could have made perfect sense, and you still end up having it with a situations you have to deal with because the weather impacts. So the plan's still solid. It made sense how to route them, what way to send them there, all made sense as a primary route. But if the weather then dictates that getting from the other stage to Arcadia or whatever is actually too dangerous, we'd rather not send them that way. We need to move to backup plans, which are, narrower routes, but they'll all get there safer. And like having thought that stuff through, and having options on routes, which is why often organizers and clients can sometimes get fixated on route from A to B, and you're like, well, what if something causes route from A to B to be unusable? And often the example would be weather, but you could have anything happen, a truck breaks down or whatever. Like a lot of those, especially with somewhere the size of Glastonbury, a lot of the routes between big stages and stuff cross over trackway and service routes. So again, if you have a bin lorry breakdown or something exactly where you don't need it and you don't have time to move it, you need your other options on how to move people. And again, you're right, programming is such a key element of that, just to stagger when people will move. And then we know to a large degree when the other stage goes down, they're all going to go somewhere, and we think most will go this way. Yeah. So you can plan for it, you can have people moved and in place for it. So there's so much to it. I don't think people, I guess all the people in the room probably do, but I don't think people outside of what we do get the amount of thinking and changes and tweaks that go into a plan long before they arrive on site,
And that's absolutely, that's critical as well, is the first design you do, you absolutely know that the final design will probably look nothing like this design. And, as I say, I put this together very quickly, but I'm already, within the second look of it, I'm going, oh, no, actually, I wouldn't do that. And that's the whole point. And that's why you don't do it on your own. You get as many heads together who are looking at the different core principles. You've got someone looking at the commercial aspect, someone's thinking about the experience. Are people going to enjoy this coming in here? Is it going to look nice? Yeah. And then obviously you've got the safety team involved in it. Have we considered, have we got the right exit width capacity? Have we got good circulation? And then obviously the operational, can we get to all the stages? Can we actually manage this? Can we put this together?
And it's another support for the contention we always make, that you want all these people having these conversations as early as possible. There's nothing more frustrating for all of us than when you're presented with a plan, and say as the safety guy, you're presented with a plan and you spot problems immediately, and you spot that it's version 11 of the plan, and you're like, where was I for version 1? And this would have been a fun conversation. As opposed to, you've all missed out on an exit now for 11 plans, and I have to be the one to say you have to fit an exit in there. And by plan 11, they're saying we've already sold the exhibition space right in front of where you want that exit. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. We can't let that run without that exit. And the answer really, though, you don't want to really say it, is, had you involved us earlier, we'd have told you that when we spotted it. But, you know,
well, that's part of the reason why we... Yeah, that's part of the reason why I think that what we do is fairly unique, in that because of the background that I have and that the team's has experience of now, is that we're already thinking about those things. So it shouldn't, of course, there'll be some changes, but it's not massive. Like, oh my God, you haven't got an exit there. Just the other thing I was going to mention was the principles don't just apply to the live environment. They also apply to the build and the break. And I forgot to mention that before. That's really critical, especially with complex builds, because, talking about operational and talking about the build period, you want to make sure that you're building it in the right schedule, like you're building the right things at the right time. Yeah. It could be something as simple as making sure you've got the trackway down at the right time in the right place for something to be installed. Or it could be with really complex, and I know things like Boomtown, where they have really complex builds, they have to build sort of from the front back because it's so complex. If they built it in the wrong order, they wouldn't be able to get in the porter cabin or something, because it would, they'd have this enormous build in front of it. So yeah, that's definitely worth thinking about as well. I'm going to stop the screen share, if that's all right, if we're ready.
Oh, and then, on that slide.
Ta-da! So yeah, I think we've gone through a lot of questions. Don't know if there's any left, but I will just say that if anyone's welcome to add me on LinkedIn, if you're not already, and more than happy to pick up the chat. And I think
I've turned on that. If anyone cares, I've turned on that put your hand up to speak thing. So if anyone wants to turn their mic on or turn the camera on and come on and have a chat, I think the way we finished out there kind of worked really well. We answered a lot of the questions. There was one, did I mark it? I did. How much of the food and beverage offer and the area allocated to it is in your scope as a site designer? Asks Leah. I guess this is also about the boundary between the event planner and the event site designer. So.
It depends on the client. Some know exactly what they want to do, and we are simply CAD draftsman. It's rare that a client won't accept our guidance and accept our suggestions, or at least accept us offering suggestions. But some are very specific, like that we know this site, we know what we want. Others are complete opposite and going, look, we know this is the site we want. We know these are the things we want in there, but we don't know where to put them. And then that's when we'll make those decisions based on those 4 core principles. Yeah. I will. Did we got that if anyone wants to sign up? I forgot about that.
Oh yeah, no, I can do that now. Hold on. Where's would you want to explain what it is first, and then I can pop?
Yeah. So I've got if anyone's interested in actually learning AutoCAD, I've got a free series of videos where you'll get a bit of an insight on using AutoCAD. It's a bit of a quick fire, but hopefully it's kind of easy to follow along. I designed it as a lead on to a main course which I sell, and if you're interested in that, then if you sign up for the free course, then you'll get access to when it's not, the enrollment's closed now, but when I next open up enrollment, you'll get some information on that. So yeah, if you're interested, sign up to the thing we're about to share with you.
It's live there now, so people can
I can't actually remember what we said in it. Did I just? It's learn. Yeah. Okay. So even
learn AutoCAD for event professionals.
Yeah. Even if you're not interested in learning that, but if you want to keep up to date with future product services or anything, that's kind of, you'll be added to my mailing list basically, and then I'll tell you all about stuff that we're doing. But yeah, we as well as doing site design, we teach it as well. So we teach how to use AutoCAD. The 2D we're also looking at. We're going to be doing a 3D course. We're looking at doing courses on the TopCon technology we use and further ones as well.
Speaking of which, Chris has come in with a question asking, can Rupert list out the tools of your craft from site to software? I like that, from site to software.
Nice. Sure, yeah. So we use AutoCAD for the software. We use AutoCAD, the full version, because it gives some more advanced features. But from if someone's just starting out, AutoCAD LT, which is the light version, is plenty enough. Like you won't you won't be touching the advanced stuff for some time. And you've even got things like geolocation, where you can have a Bing overlay on your plan, and that's on the LT version as well. And then I could probably, so we use, there we go, look, we use a couple of things. We use a drone for all our mapping. This is just a simple Mavic Pro 2. We use all that for our drone imagery and our mapping. And then, look at that.
You'll be happy to hear people in the chat are recommending your free course.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. So this is this is the controller I was talking about. This is it's a Topcon FC 5000, and it works with this piece here, which is the it's called a Hyper SR. This is the bit that talks to the satellite, and this is the bit that turns this data into sensible stuff. And this is obviously where it's actually a Windows device in the back end of it. You can pick one of these up for about 20 grand if you want.
20 grand. You'll also be happy to hear people are also recommending the paid course.
Ah, well,
you obviously got some friends
anymore.
Here today. There's another question actually. How much 3D do you do for? Sorry, were you finished with the site to?
Yeah, basically, I think. I mean, that's the core ones we use. We've got some other handheld technology. That's the most accurate that we've got, and we've got some other bits and bobs. But I'd say I've probably forgotten some clever bits that we use. But yeah, that's the.
What about the ginormous printer behind you?
Yeah, we have got the ginormous printer.
That's probably a key component, is it?
Yeah, that's pretty key. That's pretty key. Although, yeah, I mean, obviously, we most of the time we'll send a PDF, but if we're part of the process and we're managing it, then we'll print these out, and we like to have them up on the wall. It's kind of, I've got one just there. Yeah.
Andrews, and again, I don't know. Do you do much 3D stuff for clients? Is that something you guys actually?
Yeah, we do. We've been doing stuff quite a bit recently with concepts, 3D visuals, full rendered, and my in-house team do that, and they're brilliant. I don't personally do 3D, but fortunately they do, and it's really, really good stuff. So we don't do that for planning. Sometimes we do 3D modeling, especially with the car parking. The drive-in cinema stuff. Yeah. We've done some modelling of that to get the sight lines right, especially if you're working on an event with a gradient. It's really important to know whether the stage is going to sit right, and then also with cars part, understanding the sight lines. Actually, 3D can really help with that. And then sometimes with certain clients, being able to visualize a 3D model is much easier than a 2D. Like for many of us who work with site plans all the time, we can look at a plan and go, okay, yeah, no, I kind of get that. But others are kind of go, I just don't understand. It's all flat. I can't figure out, there's no depth. So sometimes we do a really simple 3D model just to help with depth with some clients to figure it out. But it takes longer, it costs more money. So not all clients go for it.
No, and I suppose not all things need it either. Sorry, I've had a few people send me private messages going that now that we're all talking about courses, that free email course we had, where they can find it. So I've just popped that up there as well. So much free stuff. And again, there's loads of people offering free kind of stuff at the minute that we can all kind of take advantage of, which is good. So keep an eye out. There's an awful lot of good stuff going on at the minute. Actually, Matt has put in the link there for AutoCAD Lite.
Perfect. Yeah, I should have put in my affiliate link, shouldn't I? Damn.
Yes, if you have an affiliate link, you probably should have. Trying to see is there any more questions we've missed. Again, if anyone has a burning question, now is the time to throw it in, because it feels like we're wrapping up. So if anyone has any, I find that interesting with the 3D. So if you take the drive-in cinema thing, like consider one of the plans you had up earlier on.
Yeah.
And then if you know there's gradients and stuff, I'm thinking about VR and AR and all that. Will the 3D render actually give you enough to figure out sight lines and the stage and the ground? Yeah, you don't need to be.
So there's a sort of a 3-stage process to how we produce the plans. Now, I'd show you one, but I can't at the moment because they're obviously all. I'd need to get permission from a client. But the end product is this really stunning 3D render, which looks nearly realistic, and you kind of look at it and go, that's it. That's what we want. Before we get to that, we create a 3D model. We use SketchUp, and we create a model which we can then pretty much fly around and be at any angle. And it's that which is really useful for the operation side.
Really good for sightlines for this exact use case.
Yeah.
Actually, Rob has just sent me a message asking that exact question. So how useful do you find 3D before going to site? I mean, we had James's session recently specifically about 3D modeling, and I was fascinated to get the answer to a question I asked him, which was from a time perspective, to go beyond the 2D and to deliver a 3D, how much extra time? Like, I wasn't getting into money, but how much extra time was involved? And he was actually saying it's probably only 20 to 25%, because you're literally just taking your 2D and adding another dimension. So it's all there really, except you're adding heights in. So he says, I would have thought it was a lot more work than that, but what do I know?
It's the modeling isn't too bad. I mean, obviously it depends what you're modeling, but if it's not too complex, then you're absolutely right. It isn't that much. The one that takes the most time is the rendering. So we put it through. Obviously, we use SketchUp to model it. So we'll use AutoCAD to create the 2D. We'll use SketchUp to model it. We'll then put it through a program called V-Ray, which will render it, and that's putting the lighting on and making it look really nice. But then to even improve it even more and make it look really like presentation ready, we put it through Photoshop. And we actually do it. There's a 2-stage process through Photoshop. We'll add people, we'll add details, we'll add more textures. So there's several processes, and it's because there are several processes that's what takes time. So, one plan that will take a day on 2D will take 3.5 days to get it fully rendered.
I get you. Yeah, and again, I think what a lot of people, because I've had emails and messages since a lot of these webinars, I think people are realizing it's weird. People have had their eyes opened to 3D not being as far out of their reach, maybe as even from a time, and obviously time translates to cost. So that I've had a few people get in touch after James's one as well and go, I thought that would be way
absolutely.
more time. Especially for pitches and stuff. When you're spending time on a pitch and taking a chance on it anyway, to go a little bit further and maybe do 3D renders isn't as crazy as you think. What's Fidget asking?
No, you're absolutely right.
Sizes of structures you had scoped in and their alignment on the ground. Not quite sure what that question means.
No, I was reading that. I didn't understand that. What about the size of the structures?
Well, I suppose if you do your full GNS, whatever. When you do that, you're getting obviously undulations on the ground and everything. You're getting, a full picture of what the ground is. Maybe 3D is the new 2D. Yes, Andrew, maybe it is. But if you do a full site survey like that, you're getting that's 3D, that's real time ups
absolutely,
down.
Yeah. Anytime we do a survey, it automatically captures the elevation levels
and
as well.
And it's well worth considering, because again, the stuff that you do on a plan, or taking a Google map of a site to do a first pass approximation on where you might put stuff, is all well and good. But I think we've all been there when you go to site and immediately see something and go, oh, that's not going to go there. Yeah. And there's changes in height levels or whatever that you didn't appreciate, and you're like, yeah, this is going to change completely now.
Yeah,
I've gone on site with clients where they've been sold on what you've already done, and as soon as you step on with them, they go, oh yeah, that's just going to look wrong. So it's at least 180 degree flipped. And they're going, why is that? You designed a beautiful thing, and go, yeah, we did, but now we're here, it's not going to work. And then you always find, especially if you rely on Google Maps, and I'm not shitting on Google, but the things will be there now that weren't there when they did their mapping. So we had it with an airport that we did a festival on, an abandoned airport, and the massive tanks, the fuel tanks on site weren't on Google Maps.
Wow. Okay.
So when I saw them, I just secretly hoped they were empty, but we discovered quite quickly they weren't empty.
Oh my God.
That changed the layout very quickly. So things like that.
Alan was saying sitemaps in 3D and interactive holograms. I don't know what that means, but what that did make me think of is one of the things we are beginning to see now and play with is augmented reality, where we can overlay our plans, 2D or 3D, have it on an app on our phone or our iPad, and be able to see the plan. So go on site and go, okay, that's where the stage is. And actually you have your iPad and you point where the stage is going to be, and there you see the stage sort of superimposed into real life. And that's, it's a bit of a game changer. That was really interesting. There's lots of people playing around with that at the moment. And there's a couple of apps that we're trying out, and there's someone we're working with to try and develop that from an event specific thing. That could be quite fun.
No, it is fun, because I tend to be of the automatic school of thought. I was like this with with COVID too, when everyone was going, just pivot, go to digital, everything can go to digital. And I'm like, not everything can go to digital. For what you work in and you think are events, yes, maybe you can go online, but we can't put, like Glastonbury can't go online. You know what I mean? Like, you can't replicate it. I'm a bit like that with VR and AR too, until I start seeing use cases like that, where we've all probably accepted a lot of clients and even suppliers or whatever, they'll come on site, they can't picture it. So if you can hold up an iPad or something similar and they see it, I can think of all the times that would really have helped me
so much.
So, I mean, that is the use case for our industry, that if it's, money-wise, it's achieved, whatever, that I could definitely see me carrying an iPad to site meetings to simply show, a client who's struggling to picture what we're trying to describe and go, here, look through that. And if that works, that's
it's a little bit tougher with the iPad because it just doesn't have the accuracy. There are some Topcon and Trimble and some third parties are working on high accuracies, but they're not cheap at the moment.
No, they wouldn't be. So that's it, I think. And again, we'll probably see them still deployed on. We all know the types of events we'll probably see those on.
Yeah.
But for the rest of us, Russell is saying he's used the Oculus headset. Kind of way. Okay, cool. Matt, good point. Sometimes that things won't be there which were on the map as well. Things will have disappeared. I've gone to a site where pretty much 50% of the buildings that were on Google Maps had been demolished by then. Which actually helped us ultimately insofar as we had more space to work with it. But it meant all the planning we'd done before that didn't amount for a whole lot when the site looks completely different. Do you work to any guidelines like the Blue Book, etc.? Says Chris. In Ireland, the Blue Book is lots of fancy estate houses you can go and stay in. So I don't think that's what he means.
I don't know what the Blue Book is either, but I mean, we do.
That's the answer to his question. You're not working to Blue Book guidelines if you don't know what they are.
Yeah, but I'm definitely not working to the Blue Book guidelines. I mean, obviously, we work to the Purple Guide. We work to obviously depends. The Green Guide depends where we're working. We'll use all the guidance and regulations.
That's actually interesting. That is a question that came up earlier. It's actually the only one I scribbled down because I knew it'd scroll off the screen on me and be gone. But someone did ask, as regards, it's going back to the drive-in thing pretty much, but as regards toilets, I think we've all seen some offerings where they're saying we're not going to have any.
Yeah.
Other offerings where they say we have them, but they're for emergency use only. Please stay in your car or whatever. So someone's asking then, what are actually the minimum numbers of toilets for the, what's the threshold of time? I think someone had said that the Purple Guide had something about 6 hours, that if you're on site less than 6 hours, that maybe you don't have to put in toilets. And I'm not sure I'd be doing the toilet thing based on the strict word of guidance. I think the idea of doing any of these things without toilets is a bit weird. I'm not saying have 40 of them, but I'm not sure I'd be doing it without some toilets, I guess is what I'm saying.
No, absolutely. I mean, of course, I guess it depends on the event and what's going on around. But like you say, it's not just about guidance. It's about experience. Again, we go back to the principles. It's not just about safety. It's about experience. It's about operations. You don't want people peeing all over the fencing because they're going to want to pee.
Definitely, they'll pee one way or the other.
Talking of which,
actually, we'll wrap up. It's interesting. Actually, I'm always reminded of something I heard Ken Scott from the Sports Ground Safety Authority say. I can't remember, was it at a conference or was it an online thing? But anyway, and these are the people. Obviously, we all know who do the Green Guide. And he was very, very strong. It was at a conference. It was live. He was very, very strong in making the point that this is guidance. That is all this is. That
absolutely.
If professionals are referencing guidance, but changing it or coming up with a different solution, that's valid. That guidance aren't regs, and that there was this. Again, I think they found with the Green Guide over the years that it's been referred to and used for all sorts of events it wasn't really designed for. So they're quite clear to say, look, this is guidance for the world we operate in. Feel free to use it if it's of use to you. But you can stray from guidance, were his exact words. You can stray from guidance when you know what you're doing and something makes sense to you as an experienced professional. And I think that's important to always remember all guidance.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say everyone we've worked with, particularly on the local authority side, has necessarily agreed with that, but I 100% agree.
There's Matt just confirming the Purple Guide says you should provide toilets at all events. You just need less for events under 6 hours. So that's where that 6 hour threshold thing. Like genuinely, and I've seen there are drive-ins happening over here where they're very clear about saying we won't have toilets. And I just that doesn't sit right with me, I will convince a client for the sake of a few £100 to have toilets, because there's so many. And I guess the more experience you have in events, the more use cases and importance you attach to toilets, some level of toilets being available, because we've all had weird and wonderful things happen, I think. Okay. I don't think any of the rest of these are questions, so I think we might be good. I think people have quite enjoyed the way you've approached this, Rupert, so thank you.
Right. Good.
Again, depending on the topic, not everyone has the opportunity, I think, to be able to dip into software and stuff the way you have.
Yeah.
But I just want to thank you for taking that opportunity for what you were delivering today. The opportunity was there, and you happily took it to show people how it actually works. And I think that's good. And I think that, along with, people have made the point, it's not about selling your course, but people have made the point in the chat that AutoCAD, once you do start to learn it, and someone specifically said, I'd never touched it before, but once you do start to get into it, like it's like I was saying at the start about Excel, it's not rocket science, but you probably do need to be familiar and regularly using to keep up the skill of it. But it's any piece of software. You get used to it, and if it's of use to you and a skill to have, it's not a dark art. We joke that it is, but it's not really. You can learn the fundamentals of it, and even if it's just to be able to change stuff or get measurements. I mean, the most I can really do in AutoCAD would be to get measurements, but sometimes that's all I want, and it saves me hassling you or hassling someone else, So even just to be able to open a file, not be scared, and get some measurements is quite helpful. So
exactly. Good. All right. Well, thank you. And again, anyone want to connect me on LinkedIn, feel free. And if you want any more information, then I'm there.
Super. Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you again on Tuesday. I forget which one is on Tuesday. I think it's Intro to Site Management. I could be wrong. Someone will tell me I'm wrong. But either way, if you're here next week, we'll see you. And thank you, and have a great weekend.
Take care.